Welcome to today's edition of the Rush 24/7 podcast.
Well, we've got some polling data out of South Carolina now, folks. And we've got some interesting tweets coming out of South Carolina now. We got President Obama blaming me once again for the lack of... the tone. The reason he hasn't been able to fix a tone in politics is because of me. A standard, ordinary, everyday Democrat president complaint. Anyway, lots here today to go with, and I'm looking forward to it. Great to have the audience all assembled here. 800-282-2882 if you want to be on the program, and the email address, lrushbo@eibnet.com. So, Carly Fiorina has ended her presidential bid. Excuse me a moment here. I'm going to clear my throat. Thank you. And Chris Christie is out, right? It's official. Ben Carson's not. Just see that Ben Carson can still win South Carolina. So the field is narrowing some, but it's not winnowing enough for the establishment. As I predicted on Tuesday on this program, the establishment, they are confounded and confused, and they don't know what to do. If you go back to the very beginning, the establishment had it all invested in Jeb, and that hasn't worked out. So they've alternatively flirted with Trump. I mean, briefly, they did. Then they tried Jeb again. And then it was all in on Governor Christie. Didn't work out. Then Rubio. See, whoever the establishment seems to want to coalesce around eventually bombs out. As I said on Tuesday, they're now back to Jeb. I guess they're not going to make a serious effort at trying to promote the candidacy now of Governor Kasich, even though he was the shock number 2 finisher in New Hampshire. So here are the latest numbers out of both national polls and South Carolina. The Real Clear Politics averages. National GOP nomination, Trump at 29.5. Cruz, I don't know what previous numbers were, so I don't know who's up and who's down here. But that looks down to me. Trump 29.5. Hadn't he been in the 30s? Nationwide polls. Anyway, down to 29.5, and it may not be down. I don't mean to say down, but it seems like it is. Cruz at 21%, which seems like that's up to me. Rubio is at 17.8%. Ben Carson is at 7.8%, and Jeb is not mentioned here. So Jeb's got to be around the usual 3, 4, 5% mark. Now, in South Carolina, we have 2 polls to share with you. The Real Clear Politics. And this is the average of all the polls out there that they study. Trump at 36%, South Carolina. Ted Cruz at 19.7%. Marco Rubio at 12.7%. Jeb at 10%. And Ben Carson at 8.7%. So the order lines up from the Real Clear Politics national rolling average. The order is the same in South Carolina, just the percentages are different. The national Democrat nomination, Clinton at 49.3 and Crazy Bernie at 36, which is only a 13-point difference, and that's a very narrow gap compared to what it was. I mean, Bernie was down there in the high teens, and maybe even lower than that when this all got going. The South Carolina Democrat caucus, Clinton 62, Sanders at 32.5. The question is, can Bernie make up 30 points? The congressional black Caucasians are all set to endorse Hillary, except for one holdout. James Clyburn says he's holding out here and not going to join the congressional black Caucasians in their mass endorsement. Mrs. Clinton. Out in Nevada, it's dicier. The culinary union, the culinary workers, the knife and fork people, they made a huge union, and they're not endorsing. Normally, this would be a slam dunk for Hillary. They are not endorsing 60,000 members. in the knife and fork union out there. Now, again, with unions, when the leadership endorses, it doesn't mean the entire rank and file goes that way. What it means is the money from the union is going to go to that candidate, which is important. On the Hillary email front, well, you know, Catherine Herridge at Fox News is on her way to a Pulitzer on this. And if it were anything else, she would be guaranteed a Pulitzer. Catherine Herridge is uncovering more on a daily and weekly basis about Hillary and this email scandal than any other network of reporters combined. And what she has uncovered now is that it's not just Hillary and a couple of others who had access to closed and secured top secret data in this whole email thing. It may be as many as 30 people, including people in her campaign, including one of her spokespeople and one of her political directors who had a lot to do with Benghazi. I mean, it was a Huma Abbott and Huma Weiner and just any number of people. I mean, it's broad-based. It really, when you get down to it, in a different era where we had different values and a different sense of morality and integrity, this would disqualify her from even running. Not that long ago, Mrs. Clinton would look at something like this and the fact that it's become public knowledge and would be shamed and probably would not run, would pull out. Even Mrs. Clinton, and I'm not going back very far, 30, 40 years, which is a blip in time on the political spectrum. But today, it's a no-brainer. It's a ho-hummer. It doesn't make any difference. Everybody did it. Everybody does it. Colin Powell did it. Condoleezza Rice did it, except they're all denying that they did it. And then Jay Carney, the ex-White House spokesman, who's now where? Where did Carney go? He's the PR. No, he almost got the gig at Apple and didn't get the gig at Apple. He went somewhere else, a magazine or something. Anyway, he's no longer the press secretary at the White House. He is out there saying that Obama wants Hillary to win. And anybody else saying that, I would say, okay, but Jay Carney? I think when you hear something like Obama wants Hillary to win and it comes from a former press secretary, I question it. I wonder if the exact opposite might actually be the case here. And then there are stories of Joe Biden waiting in the wings. But you Bernie Sanders people, I have to tell you, the Washington Post today, I'm going to get into all this in great detail today. The Washington Post has an editorial today about the utter ugliness of Donald Trump's campaign and how the utter ugliness of the Trump campaign ought to scare everybody. And they get into reasons and they, of course, cite examples. And the recent example, of course, when the Trump female audience member shouted out an epithet of Ted Cruz. Carney is Senior VP Worldwide Corporate Affairs, at Amazon. That's right. What's he doing? I mean, how does he know that Obama wants Hillary to win? Well, I know he could still be in touch with him, sure. There's something about it. I can't tell you why. Something about Jay Carney, of all people, coming out and assuring us that Obama wants Hillary to win tells me it's the exact opposite. But you don't have to guard against that kind of stuff because that could be a little wishful thinking, interrupting my objectivity on this. So I have to express this stuff with caution. But anyway, this Washington Post editorial, the utter ugliness of Trump's campaign with examples cited, and that woman in Trump's audience who called Cruz a kitty cat, and then Trump repeated it and so forth. The Washington Post is outraged. By the way, some people didn't know what I meant when I said undefeated the other day. Stop and think about it. At any rate, the editorial making this big deal about Trump's campaign being so ugly should scare us all. In the same editorial, the Washington Post says that Bernie Sanders means well. Now, can we be a little honest here? Bernie Sanders honeymooned in the Soviet Union. Bernie Sanders honeymooned in Cuba. Bernie Sanders' ideology is communism. Forget this socialism business. Bernie Sanders' ideology is communism. Bernie Sanders' ideology, communism, is responsible for at least 100 million deaths around the world. By the time you finish what they did in Russia and the Soviet Union, Ukraine, and you name it, couple that with Mao Zedong, and wherever you have found communism imposed on a people, one of two things is true. They have to build walls to keep people in. They murder dissidents. It is a fact of life of Cuba. And this is Bernie Sanders' ideology. And they try to tell us that Trump represents utter ugliness. By the way, you Bernie people, can I tell you something? You are in the process of being shafted. All these young millennials and idealists who have bought into the silly notion that socialism is utopia. And we cut them some slack because this is what they've been taught. By the way, a brief interruption of myself. There is a story, a friend of mine sent me a story today, about somebody who's come up with a brilliant new way to diagram the various ideologies. I looked at that and I said, well, I did this years ago. I explained this years ago. And whoever came up with this theory says that it is incorrect to look at ideology on a straight line. And most people look at ideology the following way. In the center, you've got, well, the way that people do it today, in the center of that ideological line, you have the drive-bys, put the Democrat Party in the center. Okay? And then anything to the right of that, be it the Republican Party, conservatism, you name it, is considered to be far right-wing fringe. And they have Nazism. How many times have you heard people claim Hitler was an extreme right-winger? How many times have you heard Jewish people say they don't like conservatives because Hitler was one? That's when I formulated my theory, by the way, to blow this to smithereens. And then on the left, they go ahead and put some of their fringe ideologies. They put communism out there. But the point is they put themselves right in the middle. But I long ago made the point to a caller. The first time was in either the late 80s or the early 90s, because it was a caller calling to ask me, in the early days of the program, what I thought of the often repeated thought that Nazism and Hitler were conservatives, and this is why Jewish people don't vote Republican. I said, nothing could be further from the truth. In the first place, I said, you cannot diagram the ideological existence in a straight line. You have to do it as a circle. And I remember the caller reacting like a giant light bulb had been turned on. And I said, at some point in these circles, everybody meets. And at the top of the circle is where the fringe of everything is. It's not a straight line. They meet. The fringe of the right, the fringe of the left meet. And I said in this story, Nazism is an extreme left-wing ideology. It's National Socialism. Take a look at the parts of Nazism that people don't study much because of the Holocaust. They focus on that. But if you look at Hitler's desire for national health care, Hitler did everything he could to expand his government, bring everybody under its grasp and control. National Socialism, that's what the Nazi Party is, and it's always been a left-wing movement. But I went to this notion, this belief that you have to express this on a circle. You can't have this straight line with the right over here and the left over here and wherever you want to put the various elements, because it's a circle. They meet at some point. And so this story came out making this very point, and a friend of mine said, boy, this is brilliant. And of course, you know me, I said, of course it is. It's my creation. Whoever's doing this stole it. So I then began an immediate search of rushlimbaugh.com and found the most recent iteration of my discussion from back in 2008. And then Cookie went and grabbed the audio soundbite of it. And since I'm mentioning it, let's go ahead and grab that soundbite. It's the very last one, number 22. Here is the actual explanation. There was a caller named Scott asking me about the differences between political ideologies and how somebody like Hitler could be labeled conservative, and this is what I told him.
It's like the Soviet hardliners back during the Cold War, Scott, were also referred to as conservatives. The extremist Ahmadinejad and his mullah buddies in Iran are called conservatives. This is something that the American left, from your spot in academe all the way down to the drive-by media, has continually done to try to discredit and impugn the reputation of conservatives in America. Now, the Hitler thing, I've been doing this for 20 years. Every year, I've gotten a call from a college student like you every year of this program wanting to know how in the world can Hitler be a conservative? The truth is, the problem that people have here, if you look at the political spectrum, most people look at it as a straight line. And on the left, you've got the Soviets, and you've got the Shikoms and all the extreme communists. And in the center, you have the wonderful moderates and independents, and, of course, the Democrat Party. And then just go a little bit to the right, and you've got all the nuts in the world. In this line, Hitler ends up on the right side of the line. That's the wrong way to view the political spectrum. You have to view the political spectrum as a circle, because eventually these two things will meet, which is what happened to Hitler. The bottom line was, what did you end up with Hitler? You had Hitler who was deciding who was fit to live and who wasn't. You had Hitler mesmerizing people, taking away their freedoms. You had Hitler using the instrument of business and government together to limit freedom of people. He started out promising them just the opposite, the best and the... It was like liberal. This guy was a classic leftist, is the point.
Right, but you would never be able to express that if you diagram this on a straight line. You would never be able to. In order to convince people, you have to demonstrate the ideological makeup as a circle. And we'll explain all of this in great detail at rushlimbaugh.com later today. Got to take a time out now. Donald Trump with a really, really curious tweet that I wonder if it's going to get much attention. No, what I was going to say about Bernie Sanders and his young idealistic voters, wait till they find out that Hillary is getting all the delegates. Bernie Sanders wins New Hampshire by 22 points. I mean, it's a wipeout. And Hillary ended up with 9 more delegates than Bernie Sanders. Now, you want to talk rigged gamers? Bernie out there, everything's rigged. The economy's rigged. Wall Street's rigged. Hey, Bernie, so is your party's nominating process. A 22-point landslide win. I mean, schlonged and schmemembered Hillary Clinton, and he ends up with 9 more delegates than she got. I'm sure Bernie knows this by now, but do his supporters? This story on the circle, by the way, the political diagram, ideological diagram, the point this story is trying to make is that we have now gone full circle in 50 years. From socialism and liberalism right to communism and Nazism. It's what the circle demonstrates. And the purpose of the story is to show how 50 years ago you had students opposing the military on campus at Kent State. You had the students of America opposing any authority, opposing all government, wanting nothing to do with it, protesting the Vietnam War, protesting the banks, protesting everything. Today, 50 years later, the students want to get in bed with all of that. They want to get in bed and be taken care of by government. There's no longer any suspicion. There's no longer any doubt. There's no longer any distrust. There is 50 years. This is the track record of success that liberal education has had. And my contention all along that even going back 50 years to the 60s, and the campus radicals. Midge Decter, a great conservative intellectual thinker, is the wife of Norma Podhoretz, once said that those people were obedient. That's the last thing I would have thought of. And so I had a chance to ask her what obedient. They're out there burning down everything they can burn down. They're protesting the military. They were obedient. They were doing what they were told by their radical leaders. There was not individual strain of thought, is her point. It was much more involved than that. And the Trump tweet Looky here. I don't have enough. I promise. The first thing out of my mouth when we get back. I feel really bad here. Rush Limbaugh up late last night consuming adult beverages. And nevertheless here, the usual time, on time, as focused as ever. 800-282-2882 if you want to be on the program. Okay, Donald Trump. And if a lot of people haven't harped on this yet or found it yet, look out because they will. Here is the tweet. Remember, it was the Republican Party, with the help of conservatives, that made so many promises to their base, but did not keep them. Hi, DT. From the real Donald Trump. Now, when you first see this, depending on who tells you this, depending on how you first see this, and if you just see it by itself and you're left to your own devices to interpret it, react to it, or if you see it as part of a piece that somebody else has put together in a way to influence you. Some people are going to see this as Trump admitting he is not a conservative. Some people are going to say, see, Trump is now so in the driver's seat, he feels free to come forward and admit that he's not a conservative, and it's actually conservatives that screwed everything up. Others are not going to see it that way. Others are going to see that Trump is right on the money here. Others are going to look at this, hey, he's exactly right. That's why we're ticked off. We had so many conservatives, we thought, conservatives making promises to us, and they didn't do diddly squat. And then they'll name some names for you. They'll tell you they thought John Boehner was a conservative. They'll tell you they thought Mitch McConnell was a conservative. They'll tell you they thought any number of people that they voted for and elected as Republicans were conservative. And yet, there wasn't any pushback to Obama, and there wasn't any attempt to stoppage. Others are going to look at this. Remember, it was the Republican Party with the help of conservatives that made so many promises to their base but didn't keep them. Others are going to try to tell you that this is Trump admitting that he isn't a conservative. Others are going to tell you, meaning it's up to you what you think about this. Others are going to try to tell you that Trump is letting everybody know he doesn't want to be thought of as a conservative. And he's dumping on them left and right here. Others are going to tell you this is how he's going after Ted Cruz. Conservatives don't get things done. Conservatives are liars. Conservatives make promises and so forth. It's going to be all over the gamut here. In other words, people's reaction to this. Now, for me, I'd like some names here. Now, I know it's hard to give names, 140 characters in a tweet, which, by the way, I see they're thinking of expanding that. Speaking of, I got to make a brief departure here. I do not tweet. And I'm going to admit something, and I know nobody's going to believe this, because I am the go-to tech guy in my group of friends and family. If anybody has a tech question, an operational tech question, or maybe even you need a repair or fix suggestion, I'm the guy. And I always have the answer. My brother said to me one day recently, wouldn't it be great if on my iPhone I could download the computer version of a website? And I said, you can. Just hold down the reload button and you'll get an option, download desktop site. Wow, you just know everything, don't you? So when it comes to this stuff, yeah. So I've Twitter, stock price plummeting, no growth, no customers, flatline. There's not no customers. They're not increasing users. And then there's another story that they're going to get rid of this 140 character limitation, expand it to 10,000. Well, if they do that, it's not Twitter anymore, is it? But what Jack Dorsey, who's one of the founders of Twitter, says, well, look what people are doing. They're copying and pasting screenshots and all that, which count as one character, in order to beat the 140 character limit per tweet. I hate to admit this. I cannot figure it out. There's a bunch of reasons why I don't use Twitter. But one of them is I can't figure it out. I've had my brother try to explain it to me. I'm looking at it. I can't tell you why. It doesn't make any sense. It does not make... I'm too logical. I am the mayor of Realville. Twitter does not make any sense. I look at a list of tweets. I don't know where the original one was. I don't know who's saying what to who. It's impossible to figure out. So I gave up trying many, many moons ago. What do you... Well, this is another thing. Snurdlers, you would own Twitter. You would own Twitter if you got to... You know, Coco sent me a note the night of the, the Hawkeye. And he said, as usual, if there's anything you want to post tonight, you want to put it on the website, you want to put it on our Facebook page, let me know and I'll get it up there. And I said, okay. And there were numerous occasions during the night where I toyed with the idea of putting something. I always decide not to because I'm an old-fashioned marketer. And my attitude is, you want to find out what I think about something, see me at noon every day right here on the radio. But other people say, no, you could tease it, Rush, you could tease it, a little tweet it. So I'm thinking about it. I've got these 2 or 3 things that I thought, I don't remember what they were, doesn't matter. And I then said, you know what? I don't want to be wedded to this yet. I'm not sure I really know yet what I think of this stuff. I need to sleep on all this and wake up and see if the way I'm thinking now is the same way I wake up, or the thinking when I wake up. I do that all the time. So I'd avoid knee-jerks and so forth. And I would hate to tweet or post something on Facebook or on my website that I woke up in the morning, wish I hadn't put there. Because once you hit the send button, bye-bye. Well, I couldn't delete anything. They'd be screen grabbing everything I put up there. Then they'd find ways to Photoshop it, make it look like I said something totally unrelated to what I said. But the 2 main reasons. One is that I believe you want to find out what I think, I'll see you here at noon every day Eastern. And then the other thing is, I don't know, midnight, 1 o'clock in the morning, whatever I'm thinking about. So what if it's not finished? What if the returns are not in? What if we really don't know what happened yet? I don't want to be wedded and committed to something. And that's what really held me back. And Coco said the same thing in the New Hampshire primary. He said, hey, I'll be ready. Anything you want to put up there. There's any number of things I could have put up that night. But I fell back and didn't do it. Anyway, the point is, I can't figure Twitter out. My brother's tried to explain it. I've sat down. He's tried to explain it. I don't get it. I'm embarrassed to admit this because I am Mr. Tech. He showed me TweetDeck. It made it even more confusing. And I looked at TweetBot. And I looked at the Twitter app itself. I looked at it on the web at whatever.com. None of it makes, one of the things that gets me is the people's name. Why are you called @real Donald Trump? Why can't it just say Donald freaking Trump there? What is this @ business? To me, that means to somebody. In Twitter, it means from somebody. So I can't figure it out. And in fact, I'm not alone. The revered Walt Mossberg. You know who Walt Mossberg is? Walt Mossberg is a reviewer of tech gadgetry for the Wall Street Journal. And he just wrote recently that he can't figure Twitter out either. He uses it. He can figure it out. He's just too complicated. That's the problem Twitter is having. It's too complicated. And I saw that and said, well, he's speaking truthfully for me. And it's embarrassing because, folks, I can tell you things about your iPhone and your iPad and things to do with them, how to fix them, how to make them hum, how to fix your battery life that you don't even know exist. And here I can't figure out something like Twitter, which everybody and their uncle uses. So I figure I'm just too smart for the app. I don't know what it is. What divine intervention that I really... Snurdly is telling me I would be hooked on it. And political crack. You mean once you go on Twitter and you start tweeting and people react to it and your stuff gets retweeted, it's like political... Well, I already have that here. See, that's the point. I already have that. I get all of that kind of feedback here. Anyway, back to the Trump tweet. I just want to prep you that there are a lot of people today, depending on who it is that analyzes, they're going to tell you that Trump is admitting here he's not, or not admitting, demonstrating, showing that he's not a conservative, or that he doesn't understand it. that he doesn't know the difference between the Republican Party and conservatives in the Republican Party. So, you Trump fans, I'm just giving you a heads up as to what might be headed your way today. Got to take a brief time out. We'll do that and be back right after this. Don't go away. Look, I got nothing against Jack Dorsey. I got nothing against the entrepreneurs that came up with Twitter. But I think Twitter is a sewer. I think Twitter is where the dregs, the human debris of our culture go to hang out anonymously. At least a lot of them. There's some good people out there tweeting because, everybody wants to be famous. Everybody wants to know everything about them. Everybody wants to just vomit every personal bit of information about themselves. Everybody wants everybody else to know what they think. Everybody wants followers. Everybody wants fame. Some decent people out there. But Twitter, in many ways, has become the sewer of anonymous human debris. And I say this not from afar. I mean, we have to do battle with it every day here. There's a business proposition. But that has nothing to do with my comments on how complicated it is and how it doesn't make sense to me. Those are two separate things. Look at how many careers Twitter may have played a role in destroying. Some idiot goes out and tweets something that's silly and foolish, and everybody sees it and gets retweeted and blown up and amplified, and the person's got to go around apologizing and explaining for things. And it may not even have really been what whoever tweeted it thinks. It's fraught with great risk out there. Anyway, don't want any calls on this. I don't want to end up talking about Twitter, Mr. Sturdley. Here's Brian, Mount Pleasant, South Carolina, as we get started on the phones. Great to have you, sir. Hello.
Hi, Rush. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I hear you fine. Thank you.
I appreciate you taking my call. I've listened for a long time, but I've never called in before. I have to admit I'm a little nervous.
Well, you don't sound it. You sound like you're really composed and focused and ready to let it rip.
Well, I guess the reason I'm calling you, I'm not sure if it's a question or a point, but I was really hoping to just try and understand a little bit better, and your point of view would be greatly appreciated.
Okay.
I heard you say earlier, it just really ties in with Bernie, socialism, young voters' apparent fascination with socialism, freebies, and the college institutions that tend to promote this type of ideology. And I guess my question or point is, doesn't it go beyond that or earlier than these college institutions and their influence on these young voters? Isn't it true that today, with parenting and the changes we've all seen in parenting, that there's a kind of a mini socialistic type of environment in a lot of these households when you consider they've taken away competition from these kids? Their bloody lips no longer exist on the playing fields. They've taken score out of the game. And in many cases, in schools, elementary and high school and whatnot, they've taken away the A, B, C, D, or F and substituted it with meeting the standard or above standard or whatever have you. Would you care to opine on that point?
Sure, there's no question all that's true. And there's no question all that's been going on the last 50 years. I am 65, and I can say the last 50 years. When I was 15, 20, there was none of this. There was none of this. There weren't any participation trophies. You only got trophies if you won. There wasn't any protection against humiliation. It was, facing adversity and learning to deal with it. Even bullies was part of growing up. And it was all about learning how to deal with adversity and becoming tough. And so when I say it is the last 50 years, and maybe fewer than that, it might be 40, but nevertheless it's true. Your point is that it goes way beyond simply what's happening at university classrooms. And there's no question that's true. And all the examples you gave are valid and not only have happened, they continue to happen in even worse ways today. The self-esteem movement that was designed to make sure every child thought he was great and special without having to have done anything to earn it. Outcome-based education. 2 plus 2 was 5, if you thought it was. They would not humiliate people in classrooms in outcome-based education if they were wrong. They would let them take whatever time it took. But the same token, they eliminated the tracks. When I was in school, it was track 1, 2, and 3. Track 1, fast learners. Track 2, average. Track 3, slow learners. They got rid of those. When I was in school, they were there. You wanted to be in track 1. You got out of everything sooner. But you had to work at it. But now they got rid of that because track 1 people humiliate track 2 and track 3 people. Can't have that. So they slowed down the fast learners. And which is what liberalism does, what socialism does. It penalizes punishment. It penalizes achievement and seeks to make everybody the same by lowering people from the top down to the level of average or even mediocre. Liberalism, socialism has never, ever, despite what they say, liberalism has never sought to elevate. It's never taken people at the low end of any scale and sought to educate them, motivate them, inspire them to do better. That has always been criticized as unrealistic and unfair. Epitomized by me one time being really roasted and criticized for suggesting the homeless get a job. That was insensitive, cold-hearted, and mean-spirited, and easy for me to say I had one. But the recent focus on millennials coming out of college and blindly supporting Bernie Sanders is a result from a study that has been done that shows that socialism per se, not disguised, not hidden in the curriculum, but socialism as an objective has been successfully taught. And so that young millennial college graduates come out of school having been indoctrinated when you combine that with all the other things you talked about they grew up with. And this is new. It is the completion of a circle. This was not the way the country operated, raised its young, raised our young, inspired our young, as recently as 40 years ago or 50. Now I got to take a brief time out. Sit tight, my friends. We only... Barack Hussein Obama. My fault that he has not been able to fix the tone of politics. Now, he didn't mention my name, but you effectively do when you blame talk radio. All of that and much more, as you know, coming straight ahead. It's already Thursday here on the EIB Network. Rush Limbaugh, the fastest week in media. Great to have you here. El Rushbo at 800-282-2882 and the email address lrushbo@eibnet.com. Let me deal with something quickly. An email asked me to explain something slower. It went by it too fast. I mentioned in the discussion of Twitter and how I'm Mr. Super Duper tech guy. I gave an example. My brother sent me a note, said, wouldn't it be great if you could load the desktop website, any desktop site on your iPhone? I said, you can. All you do is tap and hold the reload button in the address bar in Safari on your iPhone or iPad, and you'll get an option to load desktop site or load without content blockers if you have content blockers installed. So if you don't like mobile sites on your phone, you want the full-fledged thing, you can get it, provided the website offers it. I'm not sure about this. The New York Post, I'm not sure they will load the desktop site on an iPhone. They will on an iPad. And it may not be the New York Post, but there's some sites that won't. But the iPhone will give you an option, and the iPad, if you just tap the reload button up there in the address bar of Safari, and you'll get the two options. Load desktop site if possible, or load without content blockers if you want. Try it. Works every time. There's all kinds of some of the most great hidden little tricks and features that I've never understood why they're hidden. But I have enjoyed finding them and passing them on. Great to have you with us, folks. Again, 800-282-2882. Now, let me go through the Real Clear Politics polling numbers again nationally in South Carolina, because another set has just arrived here from Bill Kristol at the Weekly Standard. He does not cite the pollster by name or company. He just says it's somebody he trusts greatly. So, Real Clear Politics, national GOP nomination. Trump 29.5, Cruz 21%, Rubio 17.8, Ted Cruz 7.8, Jeb is, I think, 4.3. Jeb is not listed here, but we went and looked at it and found it. Jeb is at 4.3. And make no mistake, the establishment is they're circling again around Jeb, and they're gonna load everything they've got into Jeb in South Carolina. I thought they might try to prop up Kasich, but I think they realize that Kasich's a one-off in New Hampshire. It really isn't going to go anywhere besides that. So all the money they've invested in Jeb. Details coming up in a moment. Now, the South Carolina numbers, Real Clear Politics average of a bunch of polls out there, shows Trump at 36, Ted Cruz at 19.7, Rubio at 12.7, Jeb Bush at 10, so that's 1, 2, 3, fourth place, and Ben Carson at 8.7. Christie is out, and Carly Fiorina is out. Now, Bill Kristol says, I just heard from a political operative whom I've known a long time and whose integrity I trust. This person is working with an organization, not one of the campaigns, that was in the field using a very reputable pollster on Wednesday night, last night in South Carolina. And that's what these numbers are. And Bill Kristol says, take it with the usual grains of salt, but I do trust that these were the actual results of an honest and competent pollster doing his best to get an accurate read on the situation. So it's unidentified. We don't know who the pollster is. We don't know anything about the poll. We don't know numbers. We don't know breakdowns. We don't have any crosstabs. We have nothing other than these numbers, and here they go. The Bill Kristol pollster, Trump 32, South Carolina. Ted Cruz 26. Marco Rubio 20. Jeb Bush 10. Ben Carson 7. And John Kasich 2. Now the order lines up with the Real Clear Politics average, but let's do a numbers comparison. In the Bill Kristol we don't know who it is poll, Trump's at 32, Real Clear Politics 36. Again, this is for South Carolina. In the Bill Kristol we don't know who it is poll, Ted Cruz 26, Real Clear Politics average 19.7, so 20. The Bill Kristol we don't know who it is poll, 26 for, or 20 for Rubio. And in the Real Clear Politics poll, Rubio gets 12.7%. And both polls put Jeb Bush at 10. The Bill Kristol, we don't know who it is, South Carolina poll, and the Real Clear Politics average. So the order lines up. The numbers are fairly close, but there is some significant difference. I mentioned earlier this Washington Post editorial, the utter ugliness of Donald Trump's campaign should scare us all. The stunningly handy wins by two anti-establishment candidates in New Hampshire are prompting conversation about similarities between Trump and Crazy Bernie, the socialist victor on the Democrat side. Washington Post says, we think both men are dangerously, if seductively, wrong in their facile diagnoses and prescriptions. But Mr. Sanders' platform is at least well-meaning. Now, see, this is where I part ways with these. Well-meaning. Mr. Sanders is a staunch socialist who, for all intents and purposes, may as well be a communist. He has embraced the Soviet Union. He's embraced Castro's Cuba. He honeymooned in both places. Socialism/communism, what Bernie Sanders loves, is inarguably responsible for at least 100 million deaths around the world. It has caused, socialism and communism has caused untold, endless human misery wherever it has been fully employed. People still literally die trying to escape it. As in Cuba. You don't want to know what happens to people in China who try to get out. And the Soviet Union, back in its heyday, they had to build walls in these places to keep people in. People died left and right trying to escape. And yet the Washington Post isn't afraid of Bernie Sanders. No. Bernie is so well-meaning. But Trump, why, this is dangerous. Trump should scare us all. Mr. Trump's proposals are pernicious as well as preposterous. There's no way to round up 11 million illegal immigrants and deport them. But no one should want to live in a nation that would even try such a thing, writes the Washington Post. Well, leave it to me once again to counter this. Presidents Truman and Eisenhower together deported nearly 6 million illegal aliens. You don't even want to talk about what FDR did, another Democrat. Nobody complained about it at the time. You know, you talk about the last 50 years and how socialism has subtly now in our face overtaken much of American culture and almost all of American education. Nobody complained at the time when we deported nearly 6 million illegal aliens. And now the idea of doing something that's so inhumane, who do we think we are? Now it's gotten so bad that we think we ought to have open borders in order to be nice to people around the world. And why do people think that? Because they have bought the idea that somehow the circumstances in which people live around the world is our fault. That's also part of the modern education system. It's part of the Barack Obama ideology. The U.S. is to blame for the misery in the world. We're certainly not the solution to it. Mr. Trump is mocking the democratic process, not engaging in it. He feels no obligation to explain how he would implement his ideas, and he doesn't care whether his statements are true. Actually, Trump has published a pretty detailed policy paper on immigration, and he has issued position papers on a lot of his other plans. It's just the Washington Post doesn't care to notice or give them any credence. But where are Hillary Clinton's position papers? Where's all the brilliance? Where's all the compassion? Where's all the wonderfulness that's going to come from Hillary Clinton? You listen to those people talk. I don't know how in the world anybody can listen to either Hillary or Bernie talk and talk about how they're well-meaning. You talk about people that are obsessed with pessimism, doom, gloom. I'm sorry, I can't avoid repeating myself from yesterday. I listened to these people in their acceptance speeches on Tuesday night. They have run this country expressly for the past 7 years. They are directly culpable and responsible in every complaint they lodged. To listen to these people complain about the healthcare system in this country, how dare they? They gave it to us. They set out to destroy the greatest healthcare system in the world. It has been taken over with something called Obamacare. And the little secret about Obamacare is it was designed to create chaos. It was designed to make it a mess. Because the long-term objective was to have the American people so angry and so frazzled and so panicked that they would ask the government to come in and fix it and take it over. That was the long-term plan Barack Obama had for socialized medicine. Make the people demand it. How do you do that? Screw it up royally. That's the phase we're in with American health care now. Rising prices, rising premiums, rising deductibles. Still 29 million uninsured, which was apparently, supposedly, one of the reasons why we did this. Had that really been the objective, we could have done it for 1/10 the cost. But it never was the objective to insure the uninsured. That was just what they said to sell it to these big-hearted liberals who don't think about anything, they just feel it. So they felt good supporting this stuff. We're going to insure the uninsured, affordable health care for all Americans. And that's all it was to them. Nancy Pelosi, the day Obamacare was signed, was running all over the country. It's such a great day. Affordable health care for all Americans. It was over 2,000 pages that people hadn't read. The one thing it wasn't was affordable. And it wasn't also for all Americans. But none of that mattered. When Obama signed it, they were able to go out and characterize it however they wanted. Affordable health care for all Americans. And that gets reported, and that's what everybody thinks. And, point in fact, many low-information Americans thought it was going to be free. That's what the whole thing was about. That's what Obama was going to do. He was going to make it free. That's how he was going to make it work for everybody, because before Obama was so expensive, nobody could afford it. It was out of control, and it was unfair, and the doctors weren't being fair. Nobody was getting the proper treatment, no the diagnosis and testing. It wasn't fair, and now it's affordable health care for all Americans, and many of them thought it was going to be free. Every complaint everybody had is worse by design. Even the insurance companies getting rich. People said back then, just to relive a little recent history, people asking me left and right, Rush, you say this is designed to destroy the private sector insurance market. I said it is. Well, then why are the insurance companies so eager to sign on to it? Well, the answer to that's simple. They have been guaranteed by law that every single American, by law, is mandated to have their product. Every American is ordered by Obamacare to have health care, to have health insurance. And for a few years, you can only get it from a health insurance company via an Obama exchange. So they signed on to this because in the short term, they make out like bandits. They don't even have to advertise anymore because the law of the land is that everybody has to have it. Can you imagine such a law about skillets? Can you imagine such a law about 4K TVs? Pick any product you want and imagine the federal government mandates that everybody buy one or else they get a fine. So the insurance company said, hell, we're signing on to that. Where do we sign? Give me the dotted line. I want to sign right now. And they took the opportunity here to make some big bucks real quick. Was easy to figure out. Bottom line with all of this is it's supposed to get so chaotic and it's supposed to be so expensive and so unworkable that after a while we are all supposed to rise up in mass and beg whoever is running the country at the time, would you please fix this? Please take it over. Please just... And somebody will come along, so be happy to. Single payer, probably the best way to make this happen. Don't you think we could really streamline this, they'll say. We can simplify it. You just have to go one place now. Go to your local government office. That's all you have to do. Sign up, and you're done. And we'll take care of everything after that. Yeah, man, that's cool. That's the way to do it. Single payer. Yeah. Get rid of the insurance companies and all this other unfair stuff. Yeah, that's the objective. Just like Fast and Furious was designed to get everybody so ticked off about guns being purchased in American gun stores and being used by drug cartels that you were supposed to stand up in mass and demand that Obama get rid of these guns. It didn't work out in that case. And depending on who wins the presidency in November, Obama's long-term plans in Obamacare might not work out either. You want to save 15% your iPhone battery life? Dump the Facebook app and use the browser to face. The Facebook app is one of the biggest battery hogs in all of iOS. You get rid of the Facebook app and just use your web browser to log on and play around on Facebook, and your battery life will improve by 15%. Here is Bob in Coronado, California. Great to have you on the program, sir. Hello.
Oh, thank you, Rush. I have a question, and it's regarding your coming full circle discussion, and it pertains especially to college-age people in the universities and so forth. I'm similar age as you. 50 years ago, they were a pretty rebellious group. I was a little bit younger. I was only 12 or 13 when such things were going on in the campuses. But today, they're the most compliant group. And I don't understand that. I've always had a hard time figuring, why is this group so enamored with the administration, the status quo? Because that's not the way it used to be.
Well, but see, this is the key. Even back in the 60s, the era you're talking about, they were compliant. They were obedient. It's just to a different kind of influence, a different group of people. But your answer to it illustrates the slow, steady stick-to-itiveness of the left. It's taken them 40 years to bring about the reality that you just mentioned. And they have been very subtle and very patient. They have hidden the beauties and the fairness and all of the wonderful things of socialism in the curriculum and in the various new ways that education has taken place. And it's not something that they immediately 40 years ago sat people down and started pointing in their faces, this is socialism, you will love it. They were conditioned slowly but surely, like frogs in a pan of cold water. When the heat gets slowly turned up, they stay in the pot until they finally realize it's boiling, it's too late, they're dead. This has been a very, very subtle, never-ending series of events throughout their whole lives that have brought us to this point. The thing that socialism has never worked. It has never worked, neither has communism, and yet it remains the most seductive. It's the biggest fraud ever perpetrated on humanity. And it yet remains seductive like nothing else is. But there's another component here to answer your question. I don't want to take another stab at this. The question was asked. It's a great question. And understanding the answer to this, I think, is like understanding the answer to a lot of things. It's necessary if we hope to reverse or fix it, whatever your frame of reference is. The question is, back in the 1960s, the anti-establishment protesters were blowing up bank buildings and protesting government everywhere they could. They were protesting the Vietnam War. They were just radicals, and they were protesting what appeared to be, this is the key, it appeared they were protesting centralized government command and control authority. It appeared that they were protesting that. Now, the point is that all of those people, wherever they were, San Francisco, wherever they were in the country, they were all being obedient to whoever it was that was riling them up. Where were they getting riled up? Who were they? They were students. Who was riling them up? Who was teaching them? Who was influencing them to oppose all of this command and control authority? It was professors and the entire university system. Now, the radical students of that era have ended up in large part where? Bill Clinton was one of them. A number of the people that Clinton populated his administration with were part of that SDS mentality, Students for Democrat Society. They were all oriented toward communism, even then. They were all oriented toward socialism. The Soviet Union was their utopia back. The Soviet Union was the place that had all the answers. So they haven't really changed. What's changed is that they're not outside the government protesting to be heard. They have taken over the government. Many of the SDS radicals, look at the Bill Ayerses of the world. Who do you think Obama is, folks? And where did he come from? He comes right out of this era. He regrets that he was too young to actually have been a street protester. But all of his formative experiences and friends in Chicago were of that era. Ayers, Bernadette Dorn, and to a lesser extent, Reverend Wright. He had his own radical agenda. It wasn't actually SDS, but still, these people were all part of a giant anti-America, pro-communist mindset, and that has not changed. The difference is now they don't have to protest the government because they have taken it over. And now they are using the whole purpose. In every movement, you've got the schlubs and the leaders. And there are two different agendas. The schlubs are the true believers. They fall hook, line, and sinker for all the seductive promises. They're the ones that believe there is a utopia awaiting the other side of the protest march. The leaders are in it for an entirely different reason: money and power. It is always money and power. Whether you're talking about a communist dictator or any other kind of leader, it is always power and money. Sometimes the quest for power and money is governed by morality and virtue, and that's the United States of America from our founding. Other times, whatever it takes to acquire power and money. If you have to murder your citizens, if you have to plunder your own treasury and hide the money in Switzerland, you do what you do. But it's always about power and money. And the power is the power over people. The desire to have power to control people so as to ensure your place in the hierarchy that you have imagined or envisioned for yourself. Bernie Sanders voters are classic examples of these true believer followers who haven't the slightest idea that what awaits them is total authoritarian, statist domination. They believe in the utopia. They believe in the sweetness. They believe in the light. They believe in the fairness and the equality and the sameness. They believe in the no suffering, no pain, no unhappiness. That's what seduces them. And that's what Bernie, and to a lesser extent Hillary, and every leftist promises. Of course, the exact opposite always happens, without fail, without exception. There never is happiness and sameness and equality and fairness. There is misery compounded on misery compounded on misery as the reality that all the promises are never going to come true. Then anger and outrage sets in, and the leaders who have been taking these people along then blame people like Republicans for their misery. Because, which is Obama's classic move, you blame the Republicans for standing in your way. You blame the fact that there is opposition to your desire for sameness, fairness, equality, everybody being nice, and everybody having something and enough, and whatever it is that you've defined as your nirvana. When it doesn't happen, because it can't happen unless you provide it for yourself. If you're waiting for other people to provide it for you, they're going to take care of themselves first, and you. And you're going to be left out. When that happens, your leaders come along and blame their political opponents and tell them they have no heart. Tell you they have no heart, they have no compassion, they don't care about you, when in fact, the very people you've been following are the ones that sold you out and been lying to you from the get-go. That is where we are right now in this country. That is how Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton and Bernie Sanders, after being in charge for 7 years and ruining aspects of this country with the hope and desire to ruin even more, get away with blaming the Republicans, who haven't had a single fingerprint on any of this, other than they haven't tried to stop it. And even at that, they still get blamed. So there is an obedience that makes all of this possible, a follower mentality that makes it all possible. The misery and anger grows from the failure of the promise, and that's where you end up with the sewer on Twitter, with all of these angry anonymous people fed up that life has given them the raw deal. They should have had it all. They should have had everything. They're the ones who gave it everything they've got, they think, but these invisible forces of powerful banks and rich billionaires have seen to it that they've got nothing. They are perpetual, eternal victims. And over here is the continuing fraud of the promise of utopia. And as long as there is an able-bodied salesman for it, somehow it continues to seduce, particularly the young. One other component, very important, that in this era I think makes it especially sellable on the part of the leftist totalitarian leadership, such as Obama and the entire Democrat Party, and that is, nobody has any money, folks. Look at the number of people that don't have jobs. 94 million Americans are not working. Of the people who are working, how many of them are seeing stagnant wages? How many of them are scared that they're going to lose their jobs? How many of them think they're barely holding on, that their savings, if they have any, are going to be used up in surviving? People are coming out of college with six-figure debt. They're coming out with absolutely worthless, unmarketable degrees, like women and earth science studies for the preservation of the spotted owl boot, or some such thing. They don't have any money. Many of them are still living with mom and dad at age 30. And I don't care what all these people say. You know, it's almost a virtuous thing for people on the left to say, I don't care about money. I'm not about money. I'm much, much further advanced to care about money. Money is, I don't need money. I'm not. And when everybody says that, know this. It's only the money. And I don't care who they are. I don't care what they tell you. I don't care how convincing they are. Everybody wants money. And everybody wants more than they have. And if you know anybody who tells you that they don't, the odds are it's totally untrue because it's necessary. But with the destruction of the private sector economy, and how can it be otherwise? As this government has grown, how does it grow? How does the government grow? How in the world does it get so big? It has to take from somewhere. Like 1/6 of the private sector economy is gone. The American healthcare industry is gone. 1/6 of it. There's a lot of opportunity for wealth in that industry that's now controlled by the government. As the government grows, as the government gets big, as the government spends money, it has to borrow it. There is this pretense of paying down the debt. And the government borrows money. For every dollar the government borrows, that's less in the private sector for an entrepreneur to borrow to grow a business or what have you. And this has been going on for a long, long time. Slowly and steadily, the national debt's gone from $12 trillion to almost $20 trillion under Obama. It may not have materialized in the government collapsing, but the manifestation of this is that there's simply a smaller pie in the private sector where real wealth in this country exists. That's where the opportunity for real wealth has always been. That's what set the American nation apart from every other ever in the history of mankind. The private sector pie. Call it the United States economy if private sector doesn't sit well with you as a term. But as that shrinks, simple mathematics. As that shrinks, there is less and less of that pie for more and more people to get their piece of. Now, the way America's always dealt with that is that pie has always grown. That's what economic growth is, the pie getting bigger. And it's the result of output, production, productivity, creativity, entrepreneurism. And the more the government takes of it, the less it can grow. And that's where we are. Now, I don't know how many of these people understand all that. What they realize is they don't have any money. What they realize is they've got college educations that are not going to get them any money. I'm talking about career money. I'm talking about the opportunity to create wealth. And I know I'm not talking about millionaire wealth. I'm talking about incomes of 150, 200, 300, whatever. That's all been condemned as, how do you lump a $200,000 income with a $1 million income and claim that both are immoral? That's another thing that's happened here. You're never going to convince a family of four at $200,000 that they're evil. The evil rich stealing from them. They're barely getting by on their own because everybody lives to their income. But there's no comparison, and yet there is. $200,000 is said to be no different in terms of how we tax people and the way we think of people. But the point is the pie has shrunken. There's no opportunity to really create wealth by virtue of hard work and a great career and the slow march that's always taken to age 40. You now either make it as a college dropout and become a billionaire, or you don't. In the eyes of young people, you either become a Zuckerberg or a Bill Gates, or you don't. There's no in between. So how do you live? You have to eat. You have to have some sustenance. Government comes along, great leader like Obama, promises you're going to have health care. Okay, got that expense out of the way. I'll support that. Promises you're going to have unemployment compensation for as long as you don't work. Fine, I need that because I can't get a job. And pretty soon you're signing up to the government taking care of you because you don't think there's any other option. And you look around and you see other people doing well, not feeding and living off the government, and you think it's not possible for me because the salesmanship on capitalism and private sectorism doesn't compare with the salesmanship of liberalism. That's the Democrat Party versus the Republican Party. Answered the question right there. Back after. So the 1960s, the students protesting what? America. The students, the professors, everybody, America sucks. Don't believe your government sucks. Those people now run the government. What's their message? America sucks. America's unfair, America's unjust. They're running it, but it still is unfair and unjust. Look at Bernie Sanders and Hillary Clinton. They're running the government. Bill Clinton, Barack Obama, they've been running the government since the 90s. It's still unfair, it's still unjust. You're still not going to get a fair shake. Why? Republicans, you can't trust your own country. The message hasn't changed from the 60s to today. It's just the leaders are in a different place. They were back in the classroom back in the 60s. They're running the government today. And still running it down in every which way you can think of. And this opportunity, the creation of wealth, that has been so important, and it's I need to expand on that, but let me get to a phone call here. John in Verona, New Jersey. I'm really glad you waited. Great to have you here, sir. Hi.
Hey, good bumper music dittos today.
Thank you, sir. I'm glad you like it.
All right. The media is telling us we all should be clutching our pearls because the ugly P word was used at a political rally. If I had a dime for every time the media mentioned Pussy Riot a year or two ago, I'd be a member of the 1%.
Oh, yeah. What was that, the Pussy Riots? That's a rock group, right?
Well, it was a
Russian women's rock group. That's exactly what it is. And you're right, nobody, a problem whatsoever repeating the name of the group.
Yeah, furthermore, you had a caller earlier in the week. He pointed out that the word is used at the rally was short for pusillanimous, and it meant cowardly.
Yes, that's right.
With Pussy Riot, they aren't exactly using the word to refer to themselves as Cowardly Riot.
No, they obviously not. They are. They're using it as the synonymous, like in the vagina monologue. So you can.
I don't offend easy. I'm just that type, But if you're going to be offended, wouldn't you be more offended by that?
Well, in this case, it's always mattered who says it.
Oh, yeah.
But in either case, what we're talking about doesn't matter. John, it's undefeated. Bottom line, this discussion proves it. It's undefeated. The American pie, the American economy, has always grown. That's how wealth has been created, with people trying to get their piece of it. It's never been a zero-sum game. Somebody gets a piece, somebody loses a piece. It's always been the pie grows. And it grows as Americans work hard and produce more, create more. Well, that's not happening. The government's taking ever bigger chunks of that pie. Fewer people are working in that pie. It isn't growing, and therefore whoever gets pieces of it, it's becoming a zero-sum game, all brought to you by the American left and the Democrat Party. If they're in charge of who has money, can you blame people for turning to them? I have a lot of time today being spent reviving Hillary Clinton from her debacle. In New Hampshire, the Congressional Black Caucasians. If you didn't know any better, just glancing at Fox News every now and again, you would think they've endorsed her 10 times today. Well, I mean, you have to look at the news that way. You have to look at the cumulative effect of things. You watch news, you're doing other things, you see the Congressional Black Caucasians endorse Hillary. Then 10 minutes later, you see it again. Then the next hour, the next newscast tells you the same videotape. And by the time you finish the day, the Congressional Black Caucasians have endorsed Hillary 20 times. Cumulative effect. You get the news, I mean, and so forth. So the cumulative effect, the impact it all makes on you, particularly if you're a Democrat voter in their primaries, it's overwhelming by design. Not just Fox. I'm telling you, it's the way the news happens. It's not news. It's soap opera. Great to have you here, folks. 800-282-2882 if you want to be on the program. And the email address, lrushbo@eibnet.com. Speaking of that soap opera, let me consult yesterday's stack that I didn't get to because there was a story in the stack that explained partially. You know that soundbite we have where everybody in the news described the choice of Cheney as gravitas? Well, there was a story that explained how this happens. And it was about Hillary Clinton. And I guess I didn't save it. But you know what? I don't need to because of my memory being superb. And I remember what it was. Hillary granted an interview to some news organization on one condition. The news organization had to describe her and her campaign with words provided by Hillary. They had to call her campaign vibrant. They had to call it exciting, uplifting, or they wouldn't be granted the interview. And the story was about how whoever it was, okay, we'll do that. So the story was that Hillary Clinton, her campaign, was writing the news story. Now, there's no way a Republican could get away with that. But, of course, the Democrats do. Marco Rubio, you know, he's got one shot left here. South Carolina, Jeb Bush, one shot left here. Trump wants to wipe everybody out in South Carolina. Trump is running around saying if he wins this, it's over. There is no way he's going to run the table. Forgetting Iowa. He's going to run the table. If I take them all out here, there's nowhere else. He's forgetting about the SEC primary, Super Tuesday on March 1st. But he's trying to create this impression of inevitability. We'll start with Rubio in Hilton Head, South Carolina this morning during a campaign event.
Donald Trump has zero foreign policy experience. Negotiating a hotel deal in another country is not foreign policy experience. Jeb Bush has no foreign policy experience, period. I can tell you today unequivocally that there are things we do not know about ISIS and there are things we do not know about terrorists because of what Edward Snowden did to this country. Ted Cruz said Edward Snowden was a great public servant. I say Edward Snowden is a traitor, and if we ever get a hold of him, he's going to stand trial.
Okay, so one of the rubs on Rubio is, and Governor Christie, of course, with that kamikaze mission at the debate on Saturday night. It was. How else would you describe that? It was a murder-suicide. He was a murder-suicide. He decided kamikaze. He's going to take Rubio out no matter what. Now, the objective was not to commit suicide. The objective was to take Rubio out and get Rubio's voters. But it didn't move Christie at all. It hurt Rubio, but it didn't help Christie at all. So it was a kamikaze mission. And what Christie was saying was this guy got no experience. He hadn't done anything. Marco Rubio, cute little guy, yeah, speaks well now and then when he's not repeating himself, Christie says, but he didn't have any experience. So Rubio's countering that by saying none of these other guys do. You telling me Trump's got foreign policy experience and you don't get that negotiating hotel deals, and don't tell me Jeb does, because Jeb doesn't have any. And Cruz is out praising Snowden, to hell with that. So Rubio is coming with both barrels firing now, which... Don't get mad at me. That's the option he's got. Now, here's Trump. Trump's explaining why we are in such dire economic straits.
Because we've let China take over our economy, as you've been hearing me say for a long time. We are very, very vulnerable. We are no longer controlling our own destiny. We are in a big sphere of other countries all over the world that control us, and they're manipulators. They have a tremendous power over manipulation of their currencies, and we are into that web. And even though we're not manipulators, because we're not smart enough to be manipulators, believe me, our leaders are not smart enough, we are nevertheless in the manipulation business because of the fact that some of the great money changers of all time are people that, we're wedded with them. And China would be number one.
All well and good, but I'm sorry. The biggest explanation for America's economic woes I just gave you in the previous half hour. It's the Democrat Party. It's liberalism. It is socialism. It is big government expansionism. You simply cannot keep gobbling up pieces of the American economy, otherwise known as our pie. You can't keep gobbling. You cannot continue to make it smaller. You can't make it smaller while the government, which produces nothing, grows. The government destroys wealth and creates debt. The government does not create wealth other than with crony socialism or crony capitalism, but in that case, it's creating wealth for donors. It's creating wealth for political simpaticos. It is not creating wealth for the government because the government can't. It's $20 trillion in debt. Now, the Chi-Coms are not our friends. Don't misunderstand. But this is a Republican presidential primary, and the opposition here is not the Chi-Coms. The opposition is a Democrat party. I mentioned earlier that one of the reasons we're in this plight is something no more complicated than salesmanship. Liberalism has done a much better job selling itself to the great unwashed and to the low information voter than capitalism has in selling itself. The Republican Party has sought to let capitalism speak for itself. They have not promoted it. They have not promoted free market entrepreneurism because they're afraid of being called conservatives if they do that. So there hasn't been any competition. The left really hasn't had to compete against any alternative ideas. There hasn't been any salesmanship, except here on talk radio. There has not been, coming from the Republican Party, any sustained message of how wonderful free market capitalism is, how it is the explanation for this nation as a superpower, how free market capitalism is the sole reason why we have the greatest standard of living known to exist ever in the history of humanity. Not socialism, not communism, not whatever other ism. Capitalism. But it has been denigrated, destroyed, beat up, maligned, impugned every day on college campuses for 50 years, if not more. In junior high and high school classrooms, ditto. On the drive-by news every day and night for 50 years, ditto. There hasn't been any pushback. There hasn't been any competitive capital. In fact, the success stories in capitalism try to hide. They try to hide so people don't come try to steal their money. The success stories in capitalism try to remain hidden. They don't talk about how they did it. They don't talk about wealth because it's thought to be insensitive and unfeeling. And so the success stories, i.e. the motivators, those who can inspire, shut up because they have been made the suspects. We have made suspects out of achievers. We have made suspects out of success. We have made suspects out of people who want to achieve. We have made suspects out of people who want to achieve and succeed at things. We have even denigrated hard work. Oh, yes, we have. We have denigrated hard work. We have attempted to disqualify it and disclaim it on the basis, well, it's not fair because not everybody has the time to work as hard as so-and-so does. If you doubt me, go back to half-baked Moon Bay, California, where they tried to ban homework because not everybody had a home or not everybody had a decent enough home in which to do homework. It wasn't fair that students had nice homes could do homework because they would get ahead of students that didn't have nice homes and couldn't do homework. So homework was banned. Education was banned. Teaching, self-teaching, everything banned. Under the supposed guise of freedom and equality. And that's where we are. Capitalism doesn't have anybody who wants to sing its virtues. Everybody's afraid. Everybody's afraid they're going to be attacked. Everybody's afraid they're going to be maligned, impugned, maybe imprisoned. They're going to be called thieves, whatever else. So they just go about their business and shut up. And then when they do become successful, what do? Make excuses for it. Well, I lucked out. I'm just one of these lucky guys. Instead of being used as role models, people to inspire others to show how it was done, we make suspects out of them. It's a horrible, horrible thing. Yeah, the check-ons. But our biggest problem, the biggest obstacle to the creation of wealth in the United States of America is the Democrat Party. You want some names? Bill Clinton, Barack Obama, Hillary Clinton, Bernie Sanders, take your pick, John Kerry, Dick Durbin. The names are endless. Harry Reid, Nancy Pelosi. And note, all of them have theirs. All of them have their multi-millions. They've all got their business. Pelosi is filthy rich. So is Harry Reid. And they all do this on government salaries. Wonder how that happens. Yeah, Bernie Sanders is right. The game's rigged, but his party has been doing the rigging. Are you saying the Republicans are totally blameless? No, I'm not. The Republicans are off the playing field. The Republicans are not even trying to advance the ball for what they believe in. They're trying to make everybody think they're not who they are. They've been so successfully tarred and feathered. But yes, I'm here to tell you, liberalism versus capitalism, it's hands down. Liberalism is to blame for the plight this country is in. Socialism is to blame, communism, or the desire to be one of those isms, which desires are harbored by Bernie Sanders and Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama. They've said so. I don't have to make it up. They say so, particularly Obama. He has not hidden his desire and admiration for all of those isms, if you just listen. And we have aired many of the sound bites where Obama has said these things over the years. Folks, we're 7 years into this regime. If what they believe in had any element of truth, don't you think there'd be some signs that we've turned around and we're getting better? Wouldn't there be some job creation? Wouldn't there be some economic growth? Wouldn't there be some sign? Wouldn't there be some optimism out there? Wouldn't there be some indication that finally we got rid of the evils of the Iraq War and the Bush administration or whatever else went wrong there, and we finally turned the corner? But no, they don't even admit that. They can't. They still act like this country is in the throes of the Iraq War, and the Republicans are still running it after 7 years of them being. Listen to their campaign. Listen to Hillary. Listen to Bernie Sanders. You would think that Richard Nixon and Ronald Reagan are still running this country. Not Barack Obama and not his Democrat cohorts, who have taken this country and run it right into the ground the past 7 years. You would not know any of that happened. I wouldn't expect them to admit it. But the education system is so inept and woefully out of whack that people are unable to critically think and arrive at these conclusions on their own. It's a sad state of affairs. Back to the audio sound bites. I mentioned earlier, Obama's blaming me for the lack of a good tone in politics. Blaming me for the lack of improvement in the good tone of politics. Well, he's worked hard. He's the president. He's the most powerful man in the world. I am holding him back. And I held back Bill Clinton, folks. Same thing. If it wouldn't have been for me, why, we'd be in so much better shape in this country. I'm just a guy on the radio. Audio sound bites. We'll start Bill Clinton. No, we'll do Obama first. 2 bites. Springfield, Illinois yesterday, the Illinois state capital. Obama addressing the Illinois General Assembly.
It's been noted often by pundits that the tone of our politics hasn't gotten better since I was inaugurated. In fact, it's gotten worse.
It has.
That there's still this yawning gap between the magnitude of our challenges and the smallness of our politics.
That's BS.
We have an importation of our politics nationally and on cable and talk radio, and it seeps into everything.
What is he talking? What is this? Still that yawning gap between the magnitude of our challenges and the smallness of our politics? He's a failure in terms of the things he promised to do. He was going to unify us, create a new tone, whatever it is. He's not failed in his liberal agenda, but we're not unified, we're not loved, we're not adored around the world, we're laughed at, we're joked about, we're mocked. Now we got pictures of our sailors in tears being held captive by the Iranians. which John Kerry assured us, no, they were very polite, and they got rid of our... We've solved the problem, no sweat, the Iran nuclear deal still on course. Oh, wonderful. Yes, so Obama notes that the tone of our politics hasn't gotten better. I thought he was the answer. I thought he was the one we've been waiting for. Look, Barack Obama. Remember all the things people invested in him? How can some little guy on a radio stand in the way? How has that happened? How's a guy on a radio stop Obama from changing the tone? If Obama wanted to dwarf me with the success of his policies, Obama could render me irrelevant by making everything he believes in work for people. Problem is, it isn't. It's all getting worse. But see, in Obama's world, there shouldn't be any opposition. That's the problem. The reason he blames me is because I'm here. There shouldn't be any opposition. The objective of all leftists is to eliminate opposition. No fair, level playing field, no playing field, period, no opponents. Just get rid of them. In the Soviet Union, Cuba, they put them in jail. In this country, they audit you, they don't let you have a 501c3 tax status, or they just try to destroy your reputation with elements they control in the media. Whatever, they silence opposition. Here's the next Obama bite.
Trying to find common ground doesn't make me less of a Democrat or less of a progressive. It means I'm trying to get stuff done. The fact that that's hard to do is a testament to how difficult our politics has become.
It means that you're wrong.
Because folks are worried, well, I'm going to get yelled at by here, or this blogger's going to write that, or, this talk show host is going to talk about me, and suddenly I've got a challenger and calling me a rhino or not a real progressive.
No, it means you're trying to get stuff done. It means you haven't gotten stuff done. It means people are miserable and you need a scapegoat. Back after this. And it's not just Barack Hussein Obama who has sought to blame failures on talk radio.
After I get off the radio today, with you, Rush Limbaugh will have 3 hours to say whatever he wants.
Would you like to leave a message?
I won't have any opportunity to respond. And there's no truth detector. You won't get on afterwards and say what was true and what wasn't.
Yeah. That was the Clinton calling KMOX St. Louis from Air Force One back in 1994 in the summer. Here is Ken in Foley, Alabama. It's great to have you on the program, Ken. Hello.
Thank you, Rush. Marine Corps dittos today.
Well, simplify.
Yeah, it was some of what you've been talking about as far as the 60s came out. See, I was in college in the 60s. So I had some of those types of instructors. So they've had 50 years of this, and so I know what you're saying. My question is, or a statement then asked for a question is, the news media and the liberal side has constantly is after Trump because he responds with double-barreled response when somebody attacks him. And yet they don't say anything about Obama, the Clintons, who are masters at cutting people off at the knees if they disagree with them, and if there's any public and comment. And an example with that would be Brett Hume when he mentioned something when he was still the White House correspondent, and he mentioned something about Ginsburg, and Clinton just tore him up. And they again the double standard. My question would be one of the few unfiltered venues that the Republicans can do are during these debates. Why don't they bring some of this type of stuff out? I mean, during these debates when they start talking about, countering the Democratic movement.
You are largely suggesting that they counter media. Your observation is about how media treats Trump differently than how media treats Obama and Clinton differently, all of which they don't want to be seen criticizing the media on that basis because it's be portrayed as childishness and so forth. But the overall answer to the question is that look what they're doing to Rubio. Rubio tries to focus on Obama being the problem, and everybody is trying to wipe that out because by denigrating Rubio for repeating it all those times and looking bad. But Rubio's one of the only guys running against the Democrats in these debates. Dave in Spokane, Washington. Great to have you with us, sir. I appreciate your patience. Hello.
Hello, Rush. What a great pleasure to talk to you.
Thank you. I appreciate that, sir.
You bet. Hey, I've been a long-time listener since '89, and you back then were talking about the incrementalism of liberalism and how we had to look out for it. And you've been preaching that ever since then, and what we're seeing today with the millennials, as you said earlier in your show, full circle. They have come full circle. They've achieved their nirvana as far as they've been conditioned and educated. You don't have the ability. You can't do it.
They've been educated the deck is stacked against them. They've been educated that the game is rigged and that they don't have a fair shot. Their minds have been polluted and poisoned with all kinds of stuff.
Yes. As Erickson said in your newsletter, you will be made to care.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
No matter what. We're not going to do it through killing a lot of people, which the...
Well, now, wait a minute, that's important. What that means is, let me tell you what that means, you will be made to care. It's not just that you're going to get out of the way and let there be gay marriage. You are going to love gay marriage, and until you do, we're going to make an example of you. That's what it means. That's right,
and you're going to bake a cake, and you're going to sell flowers to who we say you can do, even though you take the risk and open your own business and you have no say in it.
Exactly right.
It's a sad day.
Yeah, but there's always we're not done yet. It's incremental. I always am hopeful during campaigns like this. Campaigns are golden opportunities to educate, inform, present alternatives. You know, what's always been frustrating about the past 7 years is there hadn't been any pushback or opposition. But compounding that is, we're living the reality of these people now. We don't have to warn people about what's going to happen if these people succeed. We don't have to try to scare people into waking up. It's happening. The negative, the dreary, the absolute destructive results of liberalism are on display every day in most people's lives. All that has to be done is to explain to people why. The objective, most of them have been conditioned to believe it's the Republicans simply because they don't care. I mean, that may sound crazy to you. How can you get away with blaming people for certain economic circumstances just because people you don't even know don't care about it? And you tell me how that works. But appeals to emotion are very seductive. But look, here's the thing about campaign. The Republicans haven't been on a field, folks. That's the frustrating thing. That's what all this is about. The Republicans haven't been pushing back. Not only have they not been pushing back, they haven't been selling an alternative, promoting alternative, or what have you. It's got people fit to be tied. Hello, Donald Trump. Somebody appears to be opposed to this. Don't care what he is. I don't care if he's liberal, conservative. I don't care what he is. He seems to be opposed to what's happening now, and so am I. Republican Party, desperate to try to understand what's happening here, only needs to look in the mirror. Dave, I appreciate the call. Here's Jimmy in Brooklyn. Jimmy, great to have you on the program. Hello.
Kudos, Rush. I want to add to your explanation of the communist movement. In the communist publications, they talk about things like capitalism is racism. To destroy racism, you have to destroy capitalism. And you have World Marxist Scholars Conference, World Socialist Scholars Conference. The communists control the teachers' unions. And here's the worst thing. The communists control the schools that teach the teachers. And they're teaching to build activists. And in the communist publication, they call the schools, the universities, they call them communiversities. So this is, like you were describing a little while ago, this is a communist movement that's been basically unopposed. They feel they're winning. In their own literature, they say they're going to win elections and get power legally. And this is why you see young people gravitating toward Marxism, socialism, perhaps without even realizing. So I've been describing this as a slow-motion coup. It's revolution by evolution. And they're winning because there really has not been an adequate fight back. And one of the ways they do it, too, is political correctness, which is Marxist mind control.
Oh, yeah. That's just pure censorship, in addition to all of that. Now, you raise a good point here, and I want to expand on it in a way. Now, you go back to the 80s and the 70s, and you start accusing the Democrats or the left of being communist or pro-communist or communist sympathizers, which happened with the situation in Nicaragua, the Sandinistas versus the Contras and so forth. It was a real tough sell because there was an evil empire back then, and that evil empire was the Soviet Union, and there were real people that led it. People like Mikhail Gorbachev and Yuri Andropov and Leonid Brezhnev and so forth. And so, to accuse what you just did here, Jimmy, of the modern-day Democrat Party of actually being communist and advancing communist agenda, it was a tough sell because nobody wanted to believe that we actually had people in this country that loved the Soviet Union and wanted to turn us into it. It was guaranteed to fail because of that. Well, now there's no Soviet Union. Russia is back, Vladimir Putin and the KGB, but there is no Soviet Union. So it's a little easier today, I think, to make the connection, whatever terminology you want to use, statism, authoritarianism, communism, socialism, liberalism, or whatever. The fact that there isn't an evil empire today, a single repository, one kingdom of the place, makes it, I think, an easier sell, because having an evil empire was actually a distraction in terms of trying to educate people who the Democrats are, what their ideology is, and what their ultimate objectives are. Nobody wanted to think. Nobody wanted to believe they were communists. I mean, they did to McCarthy and others who came along and tried to make the connection because of the existence of the Soviet Union. Well, now the Soviet Union is gone, and the closest thing that you would have to would either be the Chaikovs or the Castros in Cuba. And so you basically eliminate those. But it has not, just because the Soviet Union is gone, does not mean that communism doesn't exist anymore. When the Soviet Union fell, I told everybody that the environmentalist movement would become the new home of displaced, wayward communists. And it was true. It was true then, and it is true now. Communism was never a devotion to a nation state. And that's what made it a tough sell. Communism was never a devotion to the Soviet Union. Communism is just like capitalism, it's a different way of organizing people politically. It's evil. Depending on where you go, certain communists have built walls to keep people in. They've had dungeons to put political opponents in. They have murdered dissidents and so forth. None of that happens here. So it was always a tough sell. But if you just stick with the simple organizational purpose and structure of communism, there's no denying what the Democrat Party is. Liberalism, socialism, what have you. Centralized government, command and control economy, usurpation of individual liberty and freedom. It's the objective. What people have trouble getting their arms around is the purpose. Why, you talk to average, ordinary, low-information voters, you try to convince them all of this. The first question they're going to have is, why do people want to do that? Well, they want to control you. Well, why? Why would anybody want to control me? It's hard for people who are not communists to relate to the communist dream. It's hard for people who aren't to understand why anybody would want to be. Because there's nothing good about it. So why would anybody want it? The only people for whom it's good are the rank and file elites who lead it, who run it. And for them, it's simply a way to organize the legal theft of a nation's wealth. Pure and simple. And in order to get away with the thievery of the nation's wealth, you have to have massive total control, punitive control. You have to make people docile. You have to make people complacent. You have to do certain ways, usually fear, to make them go along with being stolen from. The worst thing for you as a communist leader is a bunch of people who don't want it to stand up and oppose you. That's when you have to go grab the guns. So what you do is you just shut them up. You give them enough to keep them happy, whatever it takes, while you're stealing them blind. But in order to get away with the theft, you have to keep them docile. You have to make it perfectly clear to them that there's no point in resisting, that there's no future in resisting, that the only thing that can happen to you if you resist, or to your family, is absolute. You don't want to even think about what could happen. And that's how they do it. Anyway, I appreciate the call. We got to go. Back after this, folks. Do not go away. I've got this call up here. Is that Lissy? She'll never get her question in because she's not a highly trained specialist. Here's her question. If the Republicans don't win, Lissy, we'll try to get to you tomorrow. Snerdley's going to get your number, and if you let us call you back, we will. Her question is, if the Republicans don't win, and with everything the Democrats are touting, if they win, why, we're further down the road to socialism, communism. She wants to know what I'm going to do if that happens. Now, I would have been easy to skip that. You'd have never known we had that call. I could have just told Snerdley thanks, but no thanks. But no, we'll tackle that. Open line Friday tomorrow, right? Make sure we have a way to get hold of her. That's right, folks. We're out of busy broadcast time for today, but there's always tomorrow here, and we'll be back. Open line Friday. And you can prep, be thinking whatever you want to ask or say is what we permit. I put on my benevolent dictator hat for Open Line Friday. Thanks so much for being with us today, and right back here tomorrow.